Hi, this is the Red Roof Recovery Show, a program to soften the path of recovery from substance and behavioral addictions. I'm Tanya McIntyre, and I've been on my own path of sobriety since 2009, and I use a variety of tools and techniques and strategies that I'll be sharing with you on every episode. The reason this program is called Red Roof Recovery, I get that question a lot. And it's because, well, first of all, it's my dream that Red Roof Recovery will one day be a residential recovery program that might even revolutionize the current models of recovery that are available in the addiction recovery landscape. That's my big dream. But I also wanted the roof to symbolize the multitude of therapies that are available in our recovery journey. The red roof symbolizes the power of the color red. It's my favorite color as well, and it also represents love, energy, and passion. And many spiritual traditions consider red to be grounding and healing. It certainly has been for me. And we all know there's no timeline for healing either, right? We're all different and we'll respond differently to different things. One thing that did resonate with me, and I was quite a few years in my recovery at that point, probably 8 or 9 years, in a 12-step program, because back in 2009, when I was in Spain, when I finally accepted that I needed to do something about how unmanageable my life had become with addictions to drugs and alcohol, the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous was the only model of recovery that was available at that time. So 8, 9 years in AA, it wasn't a linear journey by any stretch of the imagination. There were many lapses and relapses over those years. And then I was going to too many funerals. A lot of my peers were not returning from their lapses and relapses because a lot of people struggle with the principles of 12-step programs, specifically the God concept that 12-step programs were founded on. So I went searching for something else. I wanted to bring something else to my community that might offer an alternative, a more secular approach to recovery. And the pickings were slim. There wasn't a lot out there. This was 2018 when I started my search for something other than the 12-step program for addiction recovery. And what I did find that finally resonated with me was a company in Mentor, Ohio. So even the fact that it was in a place called Mentor resonated with me because mentorship has been huge in my recovery journey. So it was founded in Mentor, Ohio. It had been around for 25 years, and it was founded on cognitive behavior therapy and rational emotive behavior therapy, two things that I have been passionate about for a long time. So the main principle is that when we learn how to manage our thoughts, we then can learn how to manage our moods, our emotions, our feelings, and then all of that combined, we can learn how to manage our behaviors. I'm a grateful student of a man called Dr. David Burns. You will hear me speak of him often because he's an extraordinary man. He is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavior therapy. Dr. Burns is still involved in research and teaching at the Stanford University School of Medicine. I highly recommend his website, podcast at feelinggood.com. And he has a couple of books, the bestseller, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy. It's a clinically proven drug-free treatment for depression. And that book has been very helpful for me in managing my own depression and anxiety over the years. So I just want to talk to you a little bit first about psychiatry, because psychiatry has divided the mind into two cognitive systems. We have the rational system and the intuitive system. The rational mind is considered the slower system, believe it or not. It's controlled and it's deliberate. It uses reason to determine our choices. And then alternatively, the intuitive mind is that faster system. It constantly runs in the background, right? The committee in my head, I call it. Marketing and media tap into this intuitive system by using compelling images, exaggerated characters, and sensational headlines and narration. And I know this to be true because it was my career for 22 years as a broadcast journalist. And swimming in that pool of negativity helped to feed my progressive addictions to drugs and alcohol without question. Because I do believe that we are products of our environment. So being immersed in bad news every day was certainly starting to chip away at my soul, especially toward the latter part of my career. You'll also hear me say quite often that I'm trying to break that habit, actually, because from a neuro-linguistic programming point of view, it's not a healthy outlook to have. So you would hear me say things like, oh, yes, I used drugs and alcohol as my anesthetic through which I endured the operation of life. Well, that's a pretty heavy thing to say, isn't it? Just listen to that, how I had to endure the operation of life using drugs and alcohol as my anesthetic. So now in recovery and with work in cognitive behavior therapy and rational emotive behavior therapy and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, I am learning now to, instead of considering that I'm enduring life, I'm learning how to manage my life without alcohol and drugs. I've also learned that our mind contains an amazing pharmacy of feel-good chemicals known as neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters change with our thoughts and with our moods. So when I can learn how to manage my thoughts and my feelings, then my behaviors can also be managed effectively. So I want to delve in a little bit about how we can manage our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. For me, it starts with my language, my words. My words are actually feeding my thoughts, and then the thoughts are feeding the moods, the feelings, the emotions, and then all of that combined results in my behaviors. And I was interested to learn that our English language dictionary contains 3 times as many negative words to positive words. So we actually have to work 3 times as hard to even formulate a positive thought. So it does take this cognitive awareness to even formulate something that's going to be a positive input to our mind. The good news in all of this is that our brain is biological. So we believe that our drives and desires are actually hardwired in our brain, but our brain actually changes with experience, thankfully, neuroplasticity, right? We go through this process of proliferation and process of pruning, whereby we make this bunch of brain connections, and then the ones that we keep using will get stronger, and the ones we don't use will fade away. So the key here is to continue making brain connections that serve us in a healthier way, so they'll get stronger and stay with us. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience with the 12-step program, because you will hear me say that AA saved my life and something called SMART gave me my life back. SMART is that program I told you that I went looking for, self-management and recovery training, founded in Mentor, Ohio, using cognitive behavior therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, something else called MET, motivational enhancement therapy, and a lot of mindfulness and positive reinforcement as well. So when I was admitted into the 30-day rehab in Seville, Spain, back in 2009, I was introduced to this 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I want to read you the 12 steps, because a lot of people ask me, what does 12 steps, what does it actually mean? So I'm going to read them to you, and you might recognize why a lot of people have a difficult time with the language around it, because this program was created by 2 men back in the 30s. And they were both Christians. One was a doctor, and I can't remember the other guy, but I think he was in sales of some sort, Dr. Bob and Bill W. So they created this to help themselves, basically. And then they discovered by going through these steps, they could actually perhaps even help other people. So let me read them to you, and then you come to your own conclusions. Step 1, We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So I want to give you the 4 pillars, first of all, from self-management and recovery training, SMART. They use 4 pillars of recovery. And the first step, like this one, is probably the most challenging to get to. And that is we need to develop and maintain our motivation to abstain from our addictive behaviors. So there's step 1 in 12 steps, as opposed to step 1 or pillar 1 in SMART recovery. So step 1 of AA, or 12 steps, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So when you hear 12-step program, they're referring to not only Alcoholics Anonymous, but also Narcotics Anonymous. They have Gambling Anonymous, Overeating Anonymous. Whatever addiction you can think of, we've got a 12-step program to put on it. And the steps are pretty much the same. You just replace powerless over whatever, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2. So here's where it starts getting a little tough for some people. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I like that one. It's a really good personal development program. Number 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So this is where the sponsorship idea comes in 12 steps. You do your step 4 and 5 with your sponsor. Step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Ooh, those are those powerful words again, right? We are really not defective, right? We are challenged with substance use disorder. So what I like about SMART, self-management and recovery training, is that they discourage using labels, not calling ourselves alcoholics and addicts or druggies or junkies. It's really important. Step 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And finally, step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So, step 12, right? It's almost like, oh, having had a spiritual awakening. I spent 8-9 years in AA rooms without that spiritual awakening, so I constantly felt like I was a moral failure. So these steps can be helpful or harmful to people, depending on how you're interpreting them. And for many, many years, I was interpreting them negatively because of the brick wall I had put up in my life around God, because I was so traumatized as a child. Being brought up in a very unhealthy, dysfunctional, abusive family that was entrenched in Roman Catholicism. So I had a huge barrier to accept God in any way whatsoever, especially when it came to my recovery. It was a challenge for several years. And then when I embraced cognitive behavior therapy with SMART, I started to open up my mind more to what AA does for people and what it did for me. It saved my life. So let me just go in a little deeper into where I'm going with this program today with you, is because I want to convey how my recovery journey has evolved as I've opened my mind to new ideas. One thing that started to change for me was when I subscribed to something called Totally Unique Thoughts with Mike Dooley. I've been following Mike Dooley for about 20 years now. And he sends you what's called these notes from the universe every day when you subscribe to his website. And I really like receiving them because it gives me notes of inspiration to contemplate throughout the day. So I want to read you today's note from the universe from Mike Dooley, Totally Unique Thoughts, because it pertains directly to step 12 of the AA program. So here it is. You know, Tanya, a kind word can move mountains and change lives. But for those times when they've escaped you, when the right thing wasn't said or the time wasn't right to say it, kind thoughts can do exactly the same thing. And better, thoughts have a way of lingering, seeking, and finding their intended beneficiary, unfettered by time and space. So it's never too late to think them, nor are you ever too far away. Just a little something a tree once told me. So when that tree came into this, I thought the whole point around the spiritual awakening, because I used to read these steps in meetings, and I would read that step 12, having had a spiritual awakening, and my eyes would roll up into the top of my head, thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to have a spiritual awakening. Why am I even here? This isn't working, blah, 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 right? However, this whole conflict around the God concept can often keep people stuck. So revisiting step 12 and reflecting on my own enlightenment experience that came like years into my recovery journey. And it had to do with a tree, believe it or not, because we all have this negative narrative, this default automatic negative thoughts, ants, I call them that. It's just running in a loop nonstop in our head. And it's being fed by all of these negative messages from advertising that keep telling us we're inferior until we go out and buy something or take something to feel better. So I'm on this retreat, and I can't even remember the name of it, but Russell Allen Scott, who provides the theme song for Red Roof Recovery, he's an extraordinary guy, and he does these enlightenment retreats in Orangeville. So there's this old growth forest, and we're doing these daily activities together, and it's exhausting. And after day 2, this woman who had flown in from Quebec, rented a car at Pearson, drove to Orangeville, she left on day 2. And I had these imaginings of me following her off the property because it was just so intense and draining. I was exhausted. And it's like, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to have an enlightenment experience. And I would go to Russell and I would say, Russell, this is not working for me. Whine, right? And he was so patient. He said, just go contemplate, go for a walk, go contemplate. So I would go contemplate, and I would keep telling myself, this is ridiculous. I can't believe I invested in this, and this is not working. So I went beside a brook, and I'm just standing in silence with these old growth forest trees, and it was spectacular. And I was just there. I was just being there with the trees, and I was listening to the babbling brook, and it was so peaceful and calm and serene. And I remember thinking, these trees are so magnificent. I wonder what it's like to be just that tree, just standing there in your glory and just being, how great that must be. And then I was inclined to go over and hug a tree, right? I was a literal tree hugger. I went over and hugged a tree. I said, I'm never going to have an opportunity like this again. So I went in and I went over and I hugged the tree, and I kept thinking, I hope there's no ants on it crawling in my hair. But when I did that voice that is quite common that I hear, it was a different voice. And it said, you are one with the tree. You are the tree. Woo! I still get goosebumps even remembering that. So it wasn't the voice that never shuts up in my head. This was a different voice telling me that you are one with the tree. You are the tree. And it brought to mind my nephew, the story that my dad told one day with my nephew. So my nephew Tyler has a neurodevelopmental disorder called Williams syndrome. So now, chronologically, biologically, he's 32. Mentally, he's 5. So he goes with my dad, and he calls him Papa. He's passed now, Dad. But Dad, when he got older and retired, he started going to church again, which we all thought was very strange. So he wanted to bring Tyler with him because Tyler would come and spend Friday night with my husband and I, and then he'd go and spend Saturday night with Dad. And then on Sunday morning, he had to get up and go to church. So one day, Tyler said, Papa, I don't have to go to church. I have God in my heart. And I thought, wow, what a profound thing to say. So anytime I'm around Tyler, I have these aha moments about how I let my mindset and those blocks that I have sometimes around opening my mind to new things and new healings, new ideas, and how sometimes it just takes talking to a tree or having an experience that will give us that aha moment. So when I'm thinking about all of this distortion that's going on in my mind, I like to reflect on what I've learned in cognitive behavior therapy, is that we disturb ourselves with the thoughts that we have. And there are the notorious 10 unhelpful, distorted thoughts, cognitive distortions, we call them. There are a few main negative beliefs that many of us hold on to. And we can actually learn to unlearn them because of the neuroplasticity of our mind. The notorious 10 were actually created by Dr. David Burns, and they have been adopted by many mental health professionals. So the first is my favorite. It's called masturbation. Masturbation, it's shoulding ourselves, right? I must succeed. I must get the approval. I should know better. And then there's the awfulizing or catastrophizing. We exaggerate the importance of things, your mistake or someone else's achievement even. We can also sometimes minimize things until they appear insignificant. We call this the binocular trick. Things like our own undesirable characteristics or another person's imperfections. And then we have emotional reasoning. We assume that our negative emotions are just the way things are. I feel it, therefore it must be true. And then low frustration tolerance. I can't quit smoking. I can't quit drinking. I can't quit drugging. I can't quit overeating. I can't quit gambling, whatever it is, fill in the blank, because it would be too hard for me. And then we've got the jumping to conclusions, rating and blaming. I'm worthless because I made a mistake, or the world is a rotten place to live. And that comes with mind reading. We conclude that someone is reacting negatively to us, even though there is absolutely no evidence to show that that's true. And fortune telling, anticipating that things will turn out badly and feeling convinced that it's already a foregone conclusion. Overgeneralizing, that all or nothing black and white thinking, always or never attitudes, right? Like AA is good for everybody, it worked for me, or AA is a lousy outfit, I tried it, it didn't work for me. It's that either one way or the other, right? Mental filter, we pick a single negative detail and dwell on that exclusively so that our vision of all reality becomes darkened. Like the drop of ink that you can put in the bowl of water and it discolors the whole bowl of water. What about disqualifying the positive? Disqualifying the positive is something I do all the time. We reject positive experiences by insisting they don't count. We just dismiss it. No, that didn't really count. Labeling and mislabeling, an extreme form of overgeneralization. So instead of describing our mistake, we attach negative labels to ourselves. I'm such a loser. When someone else's behavior rubs us the wrong way, we attach a negative label to them. He's such a loser. She's such a loser. Mislabeling involves our describing an event or person with emotionally loaded and highly colored thoughts and language. And it's always beginning with the language because the language is feeding the thoughts. And then personalization. We see ourselves as the cause of some negative event, which we were not entirely responsible for. So what are rational beliefs then? If we can look at the irrational beliefs, the cognitive distortions, rational beliefs represent reasonable, objective, flexible, and constructive conclusions or inferences about reality that support survival, happiness, and healthy results. So they can promote productivity and creativity. They support positive relationships. They prompt accountability with unnecessary blame and condemnation. They encourage acceptance and tolerance. Oh, how we need that, right? Strengthening our persistence and self-discipline. It can serve as a platform for conditions that propel personal growth. Links to a sense of emotional well-being and positive mental health. It can lead to a realistic sense of perspective. It can further the empowerment of others. It stimulates an openness to experience and an experimental outlook. And it can even direct our efforts along more ethical pathways. I am not the person I was when I was 20. I was not a nice person when I was in my 20s at all. I like to think that I am not going to be judged now for the way I was when I was 20. So we need to question everything. If I believe this thought to be true, will it help me remain abstinent, safe, alive? And is this thought objectively true? And upon what evidence can I form this opinion? Is this thought producing feelings I even want to have? Is this thought helping me reach a chosen goal? Is this thought likely to minimize conflict with others? So it's really good to delve deep into these thoughts that we're having and watching our language. I always suggest that we talk to ourselves like we talk to our best friends, assuming that you talk to your best friend in a nice way, right? So we talk to ourselves in our own head more than we talk to anybody. So let's take the effort to make it a nice place to be. One of the core principles in cognitive behavior therapy is the idea of acceptance. Acceptance of not only ourselves, but also the others in our life and life in general. So I hope our conversation today has helped open some possibilities for you around acceptance. If you'd like to be a guest on the Red Roof Recovery Show, I would love to hear from you. redroofrecovery@gmail.com. I've authored a couple of books I'd like to share with you. They're available at amazon.ca and also at Finchers in the Square in Canada's prettiest town of Goderich, Ontario. My first book is called Mindful Wisdom from My Philosopher Dad, Sage Advice from a Single Father. My father raised me and my baby sister as a single dad back in the 60s when he was struggling with his own addictions. So this is just a lot of his mindful wisdom to navigate this crazy life sometimes. And then my second book is Daily Wisdom from My Philosopher Dad. And this is some inspiration to guide your day. This is set up as kind of a journal, and each page, each day, has an inspirational message. So I'm hoping you will not only buy my books, but you will do the work to write down your thoughts around those inspirational messages, because, some of these thoughts can trigger some pretty deep thinking, and that can promote healing. Remember, talk to yourself like you talk to your best friend. May the force be with you. And remember, you are the force.